Chapter 676 The Beginning of the End, 4. Day 2. Within the human domain, there were a total of 115 diamond-graded guilds. One must have at least one member of the S rank or higher in their guild in order to be eligible for the diamond rank in the guild rankings. It was difficult to start a guild, and most of the time, it was much easier and more worthwhile to join an existing guild rather than attempt to start your own. The explanation for this was very straightforward. Because resources had to be divided up within a guild, and because one needed a significant number of resources in order to advance to the next rank, the higher they were ranked, forming a guild was really not worth the effort that it took. The fact that there were only 115 diamond-graded guilds despite there being over 1,000 different S rankers alive was sufficient evidence to demonstrate how challenging it was to establish a guild. Having said that, those individuals who were successful in establishing a guild had an undeniable influence within the human domain. It was an unquestionable fact. If one were to have control of all of the diamond-graded guilds within the human domain, then it wasn't far off to say that they pretty much had total control of the entire human domain. And it was precisely this point that elevated the position of the Alliance head to a high level of significance. Whoever held that position would become the overlord of the human domain. Within the grand auditorium of the Union Tower, people dressed in suits gathered together and quietly took their seats on one of the seats that faced the center stage, which was illuminated in a bright manner by the lights that were coming from the four corners of the room. As I walked into the auditorium with Amanda by my side, I looked around the room until I spotted a couple of people I recognized, and then I headed in their direction. "It looks like you guys have come early." I initiated the conversation as I sat down next to Melissa, who was scrolling through her phone. Beside her were Jean and Emma. "Oh, you guys are here too." Melissa acknowledged my presence for a short moment before shifting her attention to her phone. Beside her, Emma was waving at Amanda in a happy manner. I was slightly taken aback by her happy appearance. Did something happen to her? Last I recalled, during our time in Amora, there was always this gloomy atmosphere revolving around her. I wasn't exactly sure about her situation, but I knew that it probably had something to do with Kevin. It was surprising to see that she had somehow recovered. "What are you doing here?" Jean inquired with his head cocked slightly forward as Melissa's body partially obstructed his view. "From what I've heard, you're not planning on joining the Alliance. I'm surprised they even let you in here." "I'm just accompanying her." I pointed at Amanda, who was sitting next to me. Indeed, this meeting wasn't something that I was supposed to attend. Since I didn't have any plans to join this alliance, I was naturally not invited to attend the meeting, which was supposed to be for members only. Good thing my girlfriend is part of one of the biggest guilds and she's also part of this. Had it not been for Amanda, I most probably would have been unable to attend today's meeting. To be honest, the alliance was an extremely beneficial thing for all of the major guilds as well as the smaller ones. When fully established, the Union will throw open its doors to anyone and everyone that was part of the Alliance, distributing all of the resources available. In addition, given the current state of the world, it was unavoidable that everyone would decide to work together rather than on their own. In all likelihood, I would have joined this alliance if it weren't for the fact that I had other things planned for my mercenary group. A bit of a pity, but things are more comfortable this way. Plus, my eyes squinted as I looked at the center stage of the auditorium, all sorts of complicated thoughts racing through my mind. The reporters had already taken their positions along the sides of the auditorium, with their cameras aimed in the direction of the podium that was located in the middle of the stage. The location was already packed with people, and a large number of reporters were huddled around some of the more well-known guild masters, conducting interviews with them. I shifted my attention away from them and looked at Melissa. There was something that I was curious about. "Did you manage to find the right herb?" "Huh." Melissa looked at me, her brows locked in a subtle frown. At first, I assumed that she was angry. However, upon further thought, I realized that she naturally looked annoyed. "You talking about the herb for the mana poisoning problem?" "Yeah." "Oh, that." Amanda lowered her head and focused her attention back on her phone. With her finger darting all over the screen and pressing the screen in several places, she passed me her phone. "I've pretty much almost finished with it. I still need to run a few tests before handing it to the central government to get it approved." "Oh." I nodded, looking at the phone and trying my best to understand what was written on it. My interest didn't last for very long and I handed the phone back. "Good job." I understood nothing, if I had to be honest. It looked like just a bunch of data that was stuck together and compiled for the sake of it. I'd thought that my acting was fairly good, but apparently, it didn't seem like it, as Melissa was quick to notice and she immediately called me out. "You didn't understand anything, did you?" "A bit. Like maybe 1%? I inwardly muttered. Obviously, I didn't say this out loud, and it didn't appear that I needed to because Melissa appeared to have read my expression with a single glance. 1% isn't much. What are you? Your expression says it all. Melissa shifted her attention back to her phone screen. Just subtly, I could make out a slight curl of her lips and my mouth twitched. As I was getting ready to say something, all of a sudden, the lights in the auditorium went out, with the exception of the ones that were pointing toward the center stage. Standing behind the podium was Octavius. He was currently dressed in a black suit that showed off the broadness of his shoulders and his overall great physique. His presence took up the entirety of the space and all eyes were drawn to him. At this precise time, the attention of people all over the world was focused on the screen of their televisions, their mobile devices, or any other medium that was readily available to them. It was announced that this meeting would have a significant impact on the future of the human domain, and with all of the major guilds in attendance, no one was unaware of this event. Almost every living human being was paying attention to what was happening today. "Thank you all for gathering here today." Octavius started to speak, and his voice could be heard throughout the entire auditorium as he rested his hands on the side of the podium. His face was as expressionless as it always was, and there was a sense of oppression that surrounded him. Nonetheless, it was this oppressive air that inexplicably emanated from his body that made those watching keep their eyes glued to the screen. In today's gathering, we will be announcing a very important piece of news. One that is about the current situation of the human domain, and the changes that will be taking place in the following couple of days. A gentle hush fell upon the place as the eyes and ears of the people attending were drawn toward Octavius at the center of the stage. While Octavius was fixating his gaze intently on the cameras that were pointing in his direction, he did not squander a single second and promptly informed the entire world of the calamity that was about to befall the human domain. In 2 days' time, the human domain will face another unprecedented calamity. The truce between the monolith and the union will come to an end, and an all-out war will start between the human domain and the monolith. As his voice subtly reached the ears of all of the individuals who were watching, the atmosphere within the auditorium became tense. Regardless of this, nobody uttered a single word within the auditorium. The vast majority of those in attendance were already aware of what was taking place and were, at least to some degree, ready for what was still to come. Without a doubt, a lot of people must already be in a state of panic. I thought to myself while quietly observing the reactions of those in attendance, which were surprisingly tame. The same could not be said for those who were watching the current events, as this was the first time the news had been shared with the rest of the world. One could easily imagine the level of mayhem that was taking place outside of the building in. Fortunately, the Union wasn't completely unprepared and had already dispatched a lot of its members to keep the situation under control. Octavius continued with his speech. "The reason I'm standing here today is to share with you what the Union and all the major guilds have decided to do in response to the current situation." Octavius continued to speak regardless of whether or not people were still paying attention to the broadcast. The establishment of a new organization within the human domain will be the first significant change to be implemented. This organization will be the pillar upon which the human domain will stand, and it will be a collaboration between the Union and the major guilds of the human domain. The Union will no longer be the sole governing entity in the human domain. Rather, this newly established organization will assume that role. The organization's mission will be to ensure the safety of the populace and halt the monolith's assault on the human domain and... Octavius's line of discourse came to an abrupt halt as he looked around the room, taking careful note of the individuals present as well as the cameras that were aimed in his general direction. His voice suddenly started to deepen. Following the completion of a voting process that involved all the major guilds and rankers, a new leader for this recently founded organization has already been elected, and I will now present him to you. Everyone held their breath at this moment. It was finally time for the new alliance head to be announced. Would it be Octavius or would it be someone else entirely? The answers to their questions were answered soon enough as Octavius announced. "I'd like to introduce the world to the new alliance head, Kevin Voss." Under the bright lights of the auditorium, A figure with a white coat draped over his shoulders and a large red broadsword in hand ascended the stage as the soft sound of his footsteps reverberated throughout the room. His gait was neither hurried nor slow, and each step he took seemed to reverberate in the minds of all those present. After coming to a halt in front of the podium, Kevin slowly brought his broadsword down to the ground and lightly tapped it against the surface of the ground. His head slowly raised, exposing his crimson-red eyes that gleamed under the sharp lights of the stage. Chapter 677 The Beginning of the End. 5. In the moment that Kevin's name was announced, I reclined in my chair and remained quiet. Looks like you've succeeded. What was taking place didn't take me by surprise at all. On the contrary, I knew from the very beginning that this particular outcome would occur. It was because I knew what would happen that I decided to attend this meeting. To see Kevin get crowned as the Alliance leader right before my very eyes and become the most powerful person in the human domain. The notion of Kevin becoming the most influential person in the human domain was somewhat perplexing, but I also realized that this presented me with a fantastic opportunity. An opportunity that I couldn't miss. I thank those that have voted for me and given me the chance to become the Alliance leader. Kevin started his speech and all eyes fell on him. It's bright. Kevin reflected internally as he spoke into the microphone in front of him. Because of the bright lights that were pointed in his direction from the far corner of the room, Kevin was unable to clearly see the expressions on the faces of those who were around him. The only thing he saw was 4 white balls of light that shone directly at him and were surrounded by darkness. It gave him the impression that he was the only person on stage. He didn't know exactly how they were reacting to his sudden appearance, but this didn't bother him as long as he continued to speak. The outcome of the vote has given me a lot of reason to celebrate. Of course, I won't exactly do that now, but I'll do so later, that's for sure. Kevin smiled, and the tense auditorium was suddenly filled with a few muffled giggles here and there. His smile faded not long after, and his expression shifted to a more serious one. Because of my previous successes, some of you should be familiar with my name already, and you should also be aware of where I am currently ranked. I am not the strongest person in the room, no, I'm not. I'm far from that. Kevin lowered his head for a moment and the place fell silent. In spite of the bright lights that were obstructing his vision, Kevin could visibly feel all the eyes of the people within the auditorium drawn toward him. There are many other heroes that are a lot stronger than me at the moment. One such example is Octavius Hall, the current head of the Union and the strongest person in the human domain. Although I'm not exactly weak, I'm still quite a few levels below people like him. That said, I am of the belief that power shouldn't be the main deciding factor for one to be a leader. Although desirable, I do believe that I am the best choice to lead the human domain to safety and prevent it from falling into the hands of the monolith and the demons. What I'm saying now may sound like bullshit, but I don't care. I think it is best if I show you all just what I am capable of rather than just saying what I will do in the upcoming months and years. When Kevin pressed the table in front of him, an image began to materialize all of a sudden. With that all said and done, I will now get to the main point of this meeting. The projection showed something that appeared to be a domed structure of unimaginable size, layered with a wide variety of different materials, and labeled with a variety of different descriptors. This structure is referred to as the bunker. The sole purpose of this structure is to ensure the safety of citizens in the event of an emergency, such as this one. The underground structure is equipped with the most effective defensive mechanism available. The structure will remain impenetrable unless an SS ranker arrives, and in the event of an emergency, a lower level within the bunker will contain portals that citizens can use to travel to a safe, yet unknown location. Kevin raised his hands and pinched the air, which enlarged the image. The moment he pinched the image, everyone was able to see the massive proportions of the bunker for the first time. It was enormous, to the point that some people might compare its dimensions to those of a city, with the center containing shops and even a large garden, as well as all the facilities that one might need to feel like they were at him. There were many more layers, but because the projection only displayed one side of the structure, people were unable to see precisely what was inside the bunker. Nonetheless, one could easily tell that it was equipped with a lot of things. Each bunker will be able to host 100,000 people and will be safely protected by multiple rankers. In order for the bunker not to feel like a prison, it is outfitted with high-tech equipment such as virtual reality and a system that can replicate the sky, to perfectly replicate the conditions of the outside world. In addition, we have made it our mission to make you feel as if nothing has changed and to ensure your happiness during your stay." The image vanished after Kevin swiped his hand over it. His previously serious face became even more so, and he stared intently at the cameras before him. He wanted the inauguration to be broadcast everywhere for a specific reason, and that reason was because of what he was about to announce next. Now you all must have some sort of idea for why I'm telling you this, and you're right. It's exactly as you think. We want you all to enter the bunker and stay there until the war is over. This is to ensure your safety and allow us to concentrate on fighting the approaching forces. The sound of Kevin's voice became more resonant as his body leaned over the podium. This is not a request but an order. As the new alliance leader, it is within my powers to make sure that all of you are safe, and thus. Kevin moved away from the podium, broadsword in hand. With his gaze directed at the cameras in front of him, as well as his eyes sweeping over the figures that were seated in the auditorium, he announced. His voice loudly resounded across the entire space. "I hereby order all citizens to evacuate to the bunkers immediately. This is an order, not a request. The Alliance will personally find you and drag you to the bunkers if you do not report within the following days." Kevin's eyes flashed a dangerous gleam as he gazed at the cameras. "I repeat, this is not a request but an order." The meeting was adjourned shortly after Kevin announced his new order requiring those incapable of combat to immediately report to the bunker. Thankfully, those in attendance already had some idea of what was going to be announced and didn't fall into panic. The same could not be said for the outside world, which had fallen into a state of chaos. The tyranny of the new alliance leader. Who is Kevin Voss? From Zero to Hero, the story of Kevin Voss, the new alliance leader. Forcing the citizens into a prison while misrepresenting it as a safe haven. The new alliance leader reveals himself to be the next tyrannical ruler. I walked out of the auditorium while holding my phone in my hand and checked out all of the articles that were being published about him. Let's just say that the comments regarding Kevin weren't exactly the nicest. No, rather they were butchering him. Many of the citizens were voicing their outrage at the sudden restriction of their freedom, while others were expressing their dissatisfaction with the new system that had been put in place without their knowledge. All in all, it was a total mess. "Ren, where are you going?" I only stopped looking when I heard Amanda's voice behind me. Turning around, I thought for a moment before catching a glimpse of Kevin in the distance and saying, "I'm going to go talk to Kevin for a bit. Wait for me in the car. Oh, and tell Melissa to update me on the situation later." "Okay." Amanda didn't say much after that and proceeded to head out of the building. I didn't waste any time and headed straight toward Kevin, who was presently encircled by a number of reporters. The fact that he towered over the reporters and required them to balance precariously on the tips of their toes in order to speak with him was quite entertaining. "What do you have to say about the situation? What do you think about the public outcry over the new decree? Are you a tyrant like the people are saying you are?" He was assaulted with questions ranging across a wide variety of topics. Even though the majority of them were extremely impolite and malicious, Kevin managed to keep a friendly smile on his face. "I have nothing to say for the moment. If you want to get a response from me, please contact my secretary later. I will be taking my leave now." After that, he managed to force his way out of that, and his figure subsequently vanished into thin air. I smiled as I caught a glimpse of the scions floating through the air and stared at the region that contained a slight disturbance. My vision began to blur, and when I came to, I was standing on what appeared to be the roof of the building. Asterisk 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 asterisk. As soon as I walked onto the roof, I was startled to hear someone throw a bunch of curses, and when I turned around, I saw Kevin holding onto a cigarette in his hand and staring at me with a startled look. "You scared me." He sighed in relief when he saw that it was me. Shortly after that, he lit up the cigarette with his finger and blew a puff. "Puff. I never knew that you were one to smoke. One can always start." Kevin replied, and I leaned against the edge of the room. "Puff. What do you need from me?" Kevin asked after taking another puff. I crossed my hands together and looked at the darkened sky. "That was pretty tyrannical of you, not going to lie. One must do what is necessary. I care little about how others perceive me. In order to win a war, you cannot please everyone." I don't disagree with that. It was as Kevin said. Trying to please everyone in a time of crisis would always lead to catastrophe. A good leader was one who would take a decision that the vast majority would dislike in order to ensure a better future. Too bad those leaders usually only get appreciated once they are no longer with us. So, why did you come here? Well, I had something that I wanted to ask you, but... I caressed the back of my neck and gazed at the moon that stood in the sky. I think I'll ask you another time. I think I'm still not ready to hear the answer. All right. Kevin threw his cigarette to the ground and stepped on it. He appeared to have an idea of what I wanted to ask based on his expression but remained silent. When the time comes, I'll tell you myself. Chapter 678, The Beginning of the End, 6. Kevin overlooked the entirety of Ashton City from the comfort of his new office. The office was about the same size as a tennis court. It was large and spacious, and the decor consisted of a few shelves with books, a large wooden desk and a couple of chairs. The floor was covered with a fluffy gray carpet, and the large windows that were located at the far end of the room enabled light to travel through the room and illuminate the office space. The office was sparsely decorated, nonetheless. This was how Kevin preferred things to be. With his hand behind his back, Kevin's face remained expressionless as he gazed at the city below. Sky that was clear blue, clouds that were fluffy white, and buildings that shone brightly under the light of the sun. Everything looked perfect, at least on the outside. At that very moment, the city was completely deserted, and the streets were totally devoid of any presence whatsoever. Having initiated the evacuation call, it was only natural that the city would end up in this state. The criticism that he got for his decree was significant. The vast majority of people now referred to him as a tyrant, and they believed that the world would end with him as the leader. Even though he was the target of numerous different kinds of curses, Kevin was no longer affected by such things. His emotions were as hard as ice. Kevin blinked his eyes once and the scene in front of his eyes suddenly shifted. The sky turned red, the buildings in front of him collapsed, and smoke filled the air as the situation rapidly deteriorated. Kevin could still detect the lingering scent of blood in the air, and in the distance he could make out the muffled screams of those who were in despair. It appeared to be a completely different city than it had been just a couple of moments earlier. Kevin slowly clenched his teeth as he watched the city revert back to its normal state after another blink of his eyes. His mind was gradually beginning to fill with recollections of the past, and he noticed that a reddish hue was beginning to radiate outward from his body. A blue panel manifested in front him. Synchronization, 79%. The rate of synchronization is increasing. Kevin murmured, his brows furrowing into a tight frown. Kevin would experience random flashbacks of his past just like what had happened a couple of seconds ago, and each time he did his power would spike, albeit ever so slightly. Normally, one would be happy with the sudden power boost. Even if slightly, any power boost at his level was considered significant. It was just that. The memories were of a past that he had long wanted to forget. They were like a curse eating away at his sanity. Every time he saw them, he felt a part of him relive the times when it had happened, and he noticed that his feelings were gradually fading as a result. The greater the synchronization, the greater the power, and the less certain he was about who he was becoming. I'm Kevin Voss. I'm Kevin Voss. Many times he had to remind himself of who he was. There were times when he would look around and realize that he had been doing nothing but staring blankly at the world for a considerable amount of time. But Kevin covered his head with his hand and groaned out loud. A sudden, severe pain shot through his head, making it difficult for him to stand. He had to lean on the bookshelf next to him for support. The pain made it difficult for him to think clearly. I finally understand why I've decided to slowly spread my memories over time. Kevin realized, the more he thought about it, that the reason why the recovery of his memories were done in batches was because it was highly likely that his mind would be unable to handle everything that had happened to him. It was possible that his previous self had devised the defense mechanism in order to protect himself from potential danger that was to come with him learning of his past. Protect himself from the overload of memories that depicted all of his failures and deaths. Knock. Knock. After being startled out of his thoughts by a succession of knocks, Emma eventually entered the room. She was currently dressed in a suit, which was quite an unusual sight, and her hair, which had now reached the point where it reached her tailbone, was now tied in a ponytail behind her head. With a stack of papers in her hand, she asked, "Have you adjusted to your new positions?" "More or less." Kevin answered, watching as she moved toward the desk where she dropped the stack of papers. According to the reports, there are still a lot of people that are refusing to go to the bunkers. They said that they would rather stay in their homes. What should we do? Force them into the bunker. Whatever means possible, do it. Kevin replied to her in a flat tone, and his eyes grew colder. There had always been at least one person who, whether in the present day or in the past, refused to leave their homes because they believed that they were safer there. That wasn't the only case, as some people did not leave simply because of the emotional attachments that they had with their place. But Kevin wasn't trying to put everyone in the bunker because he wanted to keep them safe. Even though it was a contributing factor, Kevin's primary motivation for wanting to move everyone outside of the city was due to his perception of them as being a burden on him and the Alliance. Because they were in the way, it was clear that Kevin would have a lot of trouble, and the only way to deal with that was by having everyone locked away for the war. Because he was already aware of the outcome of the situation if he had allowed them to remain, he made the difficult choice to order everyone to report to the bunkers immediately. He simply could not allow anything to divert his attention away from the primary task at hand. Are you sure about your choice? It might cause a lot of backlash with the people. Emma's voice brought Kevin out of his thoughts. She had a rather worried look on her face at the moment. He slowly nodded his head. That's fine. I can take the backlash. It doesn't really matter to me. Within the Alliance there was barely anyone that could oppose him. Most of the guild masters and even the Union old heads supported him. There was no way anyone would be able to say anything about his decision. At the moment, within the human domain, his words were law. Nothing could go against him, and it was precisely because of this that he had planned so much. Okay. I trust you, so I'll tell the others about your orders. Thank you. Kevin nodded his head and shifted his attention back toward the empty streets below him. Lowering his head to stare at his watch, he mumbled. 12 hours left. Are you certain we do not need to visit the bunkers? According to what I've read, the new leader of the Alliance has apparently issued a decree making travel there mandatory. Yes, I'm sure. I reassured my mother, who was currently holding Nola in her arms while quietly sitting in the backseat of my car. Nola was currently occupied with a game that was being played on my phone, and she appeared to be completely oblivious to the impending danger that was about to befall the human domain. And honestly, I would have liked it if it was kept this way. The less she knew, the better. Where are you taking us? My father's voice echoed from beside me, and I calmly responded. I'm taking you guys to a safe place. You don't have to worry. Regarding the decree, it's fine. I know Kevin, he won't do anything to you guys. Even though Kevin had changed, fundamentally he was the same guy. He had become a lot more ruthless, but that was about it. He still acted normally around me, and that was all I really needed from him. We're here. Following the appearance of a sizable structure in our field of view, I carefully pulled into the driveway, parked the car, and then exited the vehicle. Ren, are you sure that this place will keep us safe? My father asked, staring at the building with a look filled with skepticism. I concur with your dad. Despite its distance from the city, this location does not appear very secure. I am concerned that it will not be as secure as the Alliance-provided bunkers. You know that we don't really mind staying there. I saw the place and it looks quite nice. Don't worry about that. I reassured them both before proceeding to the building that served as the headquarters for my mercenary organization. I never get tired of everyone's reaction to the building. It always tended to be the same, with people dismissing it for looking worn down and badly maintained on the outside. If only they had known that what was in front of them was, in all actuality, an impregnable fortress that had its roots deeply planted within the human realm. Alright, just follow me. I'll show you guys soon enough that you guys don't have to worry about anything. I quickly typed in the password as soon as I arrived at the entrance to the warehouse, and then I unlocked the door. After which I opened it and gestured for my parents to go in. Don't be too surprised when you guys come in. Just know that your son has been very successful. Chapter 679, The Beginning of the End. 7. Black Market. Make sure you keep a good watch of the gates. I have a bad feeling about this. Thomas muttered something under his breath as he stepped on the cigarette that he had just flicked out of his hand. At the moment, he was situated in a large room that was crammed with monitors. He was currently perched on the second level, holding onto nothing but a metal railing, and below him were hundreds of workers who were diligently looking through the many monitors that displayed varying images of portals. I hope the reports aren't wrong. Thomas bit his nails out of nervousness. In a message that he had received not too long ago from an unknown sender, he was informed that there was a chance that the dungeons would overload the moment that the ceasefire between the Union and the Monolith would be lifted. If that were really the case, then dungeon seekers would end up in deep trouble as they managed hundreds of different dungeons. They simply did not have the manpower to manage all the dungeons that could possibly overload at any given time. Thankfully, the dungeons were located far away from the main headquarters. Thomas would have already packed up his things and left if it hadn't been for that circumstance. If the dungeons had been located inside, the black market almost certainly would have come to an end. Fortunately, they weren't. How long until the truce ends? Thomas asked, his voice unable to mask the anxiety within. 10 seconds. A voice replied from below and the room became incredibly tense. 9. The countdown started. 8. 7. 6. 5. Thomas's palms began to perspire as he tightened his hold on the metal handrails, and his grip became increasingly more forceful. When he tried to swallow a mouthful of saliva, he realized that he couldn't as it felt as though something was stuck in his throat. The countdown continued. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. When the countdown reached 0, the room went completely silent, and no one spoke a word while their eyes were all fixed on the monitors that were located at the front of the room. Time slowly passed and the portals that were displayed on the monitors remained still. As everyone in the room kept their attention focused on the monitors, the level of tension within the space reached an all-time high. With the fact that everybody was holding their breath, there was no sound at all, not even the sound of people breathing. Was the information wrong? Around the minute mark, Thomas started to wonder if the information that he had been given was reliable. Although it was anonymous in reality, almost everyone knew that it was from the current alliance leader, Kevin Voss. No, for someone who has managed to make all the other top rankers of the world bow their heads toward him, there's no doubt that he is capable. What's going on? Screen down. Screen down. He wasn't even able to finish his thoughts before one of the monitors suddenly turned black. My screen is also down. Screen down. Over 30 screens went blank within the span of time it took one person to finish a glass of water, and the entire space took on an expression of stunned panic as a result. People stood up and ran around the room in an effort to get a better look at the portals or make contact with the individuals who were tasked with protecting them. Did you manage to get in contact with someone? Is there any response? Naturally, Thomas was one of those people who was running around the location in an attempt to gain a better understanding of the situation. There were over 30 different cameras that malfunctioned and more were still breaking down every minute. It was abundantly clear that the information was accurate and that it was exactly as Thomas had feared it would be. The dungeons were overloading. Load the backup cameras. Get the drones up so that we can get a better view. Quick. Quick. Thomas kept barking orders as he jumped down the railing and shoved one of the workers to the side. As he stared at the empty monitor in front of him, he pulled out the keyboard and began typing all kinds of different codes. Soon after, green text began to fill the monitor screens in front of him. It didn't take him more than a minute to fill the entire page with green text, and when he finally managed to press the enter button, the text began to move at an increasingly rapid pace. It wasn't long before the screen began to flash and images began to appear. Dear God! The instant that Thomas was able to get a visual on the screen, his hands began to shake and his mouth fell open in shock. Next to him, an increasing number of screens began to display similar images, in which tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of monsters frantically ran out of the portal, slaying anything that was in their path. Ecosystems were wiped out along with the landscapes and trees that were uprooted in the process. What was happening was nothing short of the start of the apocalypse. Hoo. The piercing wail of the sirens reverberated throughout the entire city of Ashton, which was at this point completely devoid of any inhabitants. There was not a single soul in the city and the city was eerily quiet. The same events transpired in each of the other cities that were part of the human domain. Whether it was Dromeda City, Park City, or any of the other great cities, they all displayed the same kinds of scenes. In fact, the cities weren't actually completely deserted. People were seen walking around the streets, some of them clad in heavy metal armor, while others sported black suits, sunglasses, and carried papers in their hands. They were agents of the central government and people who had volunteered to stay behind in order to maintain the city's safety. Only those with a rank of C or higher, as decreed by the Alliance's leader, are permitted to remain on the streets. Please evacuate to the bunkers if your rank is lower than C. A voice that was uninterestingly monotonous reverberated. It was the property of a man with a long, snub-nosed face, black hair reaching his shoulders and brown eyes. He was currently lounging about on a little chair, with one arm propped up against the table so that it supported the side of his face. In front of him was a miniature clipboard on which a number of guidelines had been written. Two people approached the man with the long nose and stood in front of him with eager expressions on their faces. What if I want to help out with miscellaneous stuff? I'm sure I can be of use. Even if I'm not strong, I'm very capable when it comes to that type of stuff. Me too. We will have you know that we're both Locke graduates. We definitely know what we're doing. The man with the long nose let out a sigh as he lowered the clipper that he was holding. The manner in which he carried himself made it abundantly clear that he was unhappy to be in this location. Having said that, the moment he heard the words Locke graduates, he couldn't bring himself to let them go, and considering their age, it wasn't exactly fair to say that they weren't talented. Thus he decided to hear them out. All right then, what are your names? Ram Johnson and Leo Smith. Ram answered. He had lost a significant amount of weight in comparison to when he was at the Locke, and his body was now at a point where it could be described as being quite muscular. This made him appear to be quite attractive, as evidenced by the fact that the gazes of some of the people in the vicinity were lingering over his body. Ram and Leon? Okay. The man with the long nose wrote their names down on the clipper and then pointed toward the rear where a large tent stood. Since you guys still don't meet the criteria, you'll have to hang out with us agents. It's all good though, we were running low on hands, so you guys came at the perfect time. The man with the long nose stood up and proceeded to the interior of the tent, where he gave Ram and Leo a couple of tasks, to which they both nodded their heads in agreement and attended to. Just take note and register what's inside of all of these boxes. There's important artifacts that we will later give out to the towers when the situation calls for it. All of them cost a pretty penny, so be careful with them. Understood. Sure. After giving a nod of approval, the man with the long nose exited the tent, leaving Ram and Leon to fend for themselves. The two of them stood there in silence for a while, and then Leon spoke up. I guess we should start working. Yeah. Ram responded with a slight nod before moving toward one of the boxes, opening it and looking through its contents. Ram was taken aback when he first opened the box and discovered a variety of priceless artifacts contained within. When his eyes fell on them, he couldn't help but voice his thoughts out loud. Don't you think it's a bit irresponsible of them to leave the two of us to handle everything? Aren't they afraid we're spies? Maybe. Leo responded while he rummaged through the box in front of him and cautiously removed the artifacts that were kept inside. To be honest, they probably have some sort of way to tell if we're spies or not. I'm not entirely sure of how, but I don't think they're that careless. Oh, I see. Ram nodded, quietly getting back to work. For the next 10 minutes, neither one of the two talked. It was then that Ram out one of the boxes away and looked at Leon. Say, have you gotten in touch with Rin? Rin. After a brief pause, Leon set the box down. He shook his head as he raised his head to look at the small lamp that was placed at the very top of the tent. He's one of the strongest people in the human domain right now. He's probably too busy to meet with us. Haha, yeah. He's probably way too busy handling all the important stuff. I can already imagine him cursing out loud at all the work he has to do. He probably is. After laughing, Ram turned his attention back to the boxes and continued to look at them. When he was on the verge of moving to the next box, the room began to shake and Leon and Ram exchanged glances with each other. Rumble. They immediately stopped whatever it was that they were doing and dashed outside of the tent, where they found the man with the long nose from earlier. What's going on? Did something happen? They immediately began to question him, but when they did so and received no response, the two of them raised their heads to the sky. It was at that moment that they saw a large pillar of light shoot toward the sky in the distance, piercing right through it and sending out powerful pulses of energy into the air. Those who were there were taken aback when they heard a cracking sound and noticed that the tear in the sky had begun to grow. This was the beginning of the end. Chapter 680. Thank you. 1. As predicted, when the countdown reached 0, the world descended into chaos as dungeons began to overload and monsters entered the human world. The monolith then turned on the mana compressor, which caused the tear in the sky to grow and sucked in the incoming mana, turning it into demonic energy and making the monsters go even wilder. Domic Square, Ashton City. Will you be fine? I asked while looking at Angelica, who was facing the other way from me. At that moment, we were perched on the roof of a structure, and we gazed off into the not-too-distant horizon, where a massive portal was located. While we were talking, thousands upon thousands of monsters poured out of the portal, wreaking havoc on everything that was in their immediate vicinity. To everyone's relief, there were already multiple heroes stationed near the portal, and things seemed to be holding steady for the time being. Having said that, we required that portal right now in order to get Angelica back into the demon realm. No problem. Angelica responded while calmly looking at the portal in the distance. If you manage to distract everyone for a moment, I will have no trouble entering the portal. Well, okay. I shrugged my shoulders. If that's what you want, I can easily do that for you. Distracting everyone was as easy as me lifting my hand, literally. Plus, with the cameras shut off thanks to Ryan, I didn't need to worry about the others seeing the full scale of my strength. It wasn't time just yet. So are you ready? I am. Angelica nodded solemnly and gazed into the distance with a complicated look. You can start. Okay. I did not waste any time and immediately thrust my hand downward after raising it into the air. The ground began to tremble almost instantly as a result of my actions, and the area around the portal also began to shake. The area around the portal began to fill with cracks, and suddenly hundreds of sword energies appeared out of nowhere. Then, as if rain had fallen upon the land, the sword energies shot toward the beasts that were rampaging next to the portal at alarming rates. The wails of the monsters could be heard throughout the entirety of the city as blood spilled into the air and the city fell into an eerie state of silence. In that moment, all eyes gathered on me and I gently mumbled, "Go." Angelica vanished from the spot beside me, and I clenched my hand into a fist. The rain of sword energies shot toward the ground at a faster rate, and at the same time, a large cloud of dust began to diffuse in the air, which obscured everyone's vision. From where I was standing, I could see the members of the Alliance becoming frantic as they scrambled to find cover all over the place. They were unaware that I could manipulate my power to steer clear of them at all times, which meant that they did not need to be concerned about being put in jeopardy. I'm at the portal. I will be going in now. Angelica's voice echoed inside my ears, and a faint curl spread across my lips. Alright, good luck. I'll see you in 3 months. If you aren't back by then, I'll make a quick trip over there. Yes. That was virtually the last thing I heard from Angelica before I was no longer able to communicate with her. At that moment, I stopped channeling my mana and turned around. I guess my job is done for now. What did you say? As Kevin looked at Emma, who was standing in front of him with an expression that was very similar to his own, he felt a dull ache in his head. She repeated, "We've received reports of someone appearing out of nowhere and killing most of the monsters emerging from one of the main dungeons in Domic Square. No one has been hurt and there is no camera footage of the incident, but..." "Yeah, I know. It's definitely what you're thinking." Kevin set a few documents to the side and massaged his head. I should have seen this coming. Ren's actions seemed simple on the outside, but they were anything but simple. Even though Kevin was aware that Ren probably had something to do and that he had a good reason for doing what he did, but what Ren did may appear to an outsider to be a direct challenge to Kevin's authority. Even though Ren wasn't part of the Alliance, the portal was under the jurisdiction of the Alliance. What he had done was essentially trespass on the properties of another organization, and Kevin could already tell that he would soon enough get a bunch of messages from the other Alliance members expressing their dissatisfaction with him for his actions. Ugh. The more he thought about it, the more his head throbbed. He did it on purpose. Outskirts of Dromeda City. The icy gaze of Mo Jinhao continued to fixate on the enormous city off in the distance. The sky above the city was covered by a translucent holographic blue dome. The dome served as a defensive structure for the entire city, covering it entirely and preventing any wild animals from entering the area. It wasn't only limited to the animals, but members of the monolith as well. Had it not been for the translucent dome that was protecting the entire city, the place would have long crumbled under all of the beast attacks. How are the preparations proceeding? Mo Jinhao asked, and 2 figures appeared behind him within an instant. Both of them were concealed behind large white masks that covered their entire faces. In spite of the fact that the figures' faces were obscured, It was still possible to make out that they did not have any expressions on their faces. The manner in which they carried themselves was extremely disciplined, and they looked no different from puppets. They were most likely updated versions of the super soldier plan that the monolith had been working on for years. Reporting, the defensive mechanism behind the dome is more secure than originally anticipated. It is as if someone already knew what we were planning beforehand and made the proper arrangements. Original tasks cannot be carried out. Chance of failure is estimated to be above 50%. After hearing one of the two figures speak, Mo Jinhao's expression took a turn for the worse. Since a few months prior to the end of the truce, things had gone awry for him and the monolith. From the spies to what happened with Evervlood and now this, it was as if someone was watching their every move and predicting everything that they were doing. Considering all the plans they had made beforehand, this was particularly irritating. They would have most likely already taken control of a quarter of the human domain if it weren't for the defeats they suffered along the way. It looks like I will have to contact the leader. Mo Jinhao quickly came to the conclusion that things couldn't continue in this manner, so he decided to give Malik al-Shaytan a call in the hopes of gaining a better understanding of how to proceed. Is there something wrong? The line connected shortly after and Mo Jinhao heard Hemlock's voice. He quickly reported his findings to him. Several difficulties exist. It appears that the Alliance, or whatever their little organization is called, has arrived prepared and has already made the necessary arrangements to sabotage our original plans. That does indeed sound a little problematic. Hemlock replied in a soft tone. In spite of the news he received, he didn't seem to be that affected by it. Rather, based on the tone of his voice, Mo Jinhao had a sneaking suspicion that he already knew that this would occur. Was he perhaps overthinking things? Mo Jinhao wasn't sure. Despite the many years he had spent with Hemlock, he had never been able to discern his thoughts. He perpetually exuded an air of mystery that made it difficult for those who were around him to gain an accurate understanding of what he was thinking at any given moment. And it was exactly this trait of his that made him especially terrifying to the elders of the monolith. What do you suggest that I do? Conquering Andromeda City is extremely important if we want to get to Ashton City. The human domain was structured as such. For great cities and the capital city, Ashton City, right in the middle of the four. The purpose of the four great cities was simple. Act as a last defensive line for Ashton City. If the monolith wanted to bring their full force to Ashton City, they first needed to conquer the other four great cities. Only then could they send their full force there. Because Ashton City had all of its portals closed, the only way to get inside was to go through the other four great cities, each of which had also locked all of its portals. There was no other way in because constructing a portal that could transport thousands upon thousands of people at once was impossible without drawing unnecessary attention to the structure. The others are facing a similar situation to yours. Since that's the case, it is best if you go directly in yourself and sneak a couple of the soldiers with you. Sneak in? Mo Jinhao's brows furrowed. Even though he was confident that he wouldn't have any trouble sneaking into the city given his strength, he didn't understand how that would be of any use given that he would undoubtedly be caught if he came close enough to the operating system of the shield that surrounded the city. Hemlock answered his question shortly after. Have one of the soldiers carry a bomb and have him detonate the entire building where the shield system is located. What? Jinhao was taken aback by Hemlock's sudden proposal. He quickly shook his head. That's impossible. The Alliance will quickly be able to tell that something is wrong. Even if I somehow manage to sneak everyone in, it will be impossible to detonate the space unless someone creates a distraction, but we both know that I can't do that as I will most likely die. Don't worry. Hemlock reassured, his tone calm as ever. I've already thought things through. You don't have to worry about anything. Just trust me and do what I told you to do. If you follow the steps correctly, you will be able to accomplish the mission without any problems. But, trust me. Hemlock repeated, and Jinhao eventually relented, relaxing his shoulders a bit. Alright, I'll do as you say. I'll infiltrate the city and sneak the soldiers into the defensive structure. There was a reason why Hemlock was the leader. He was a very capable individual who managed to achieve what he set out to achieve. There was no need to doubt him. All he had to do was follow his order. That was his job. That's all I wanted. All right. Mo Jinhao disconnected his call with Hemlock and once again focused his attention on the city in the distance. Taking a deep breath, his cold and languid gray eyes became a little more animated as he muttered. I'm sure the leader has already thought of everything. All I have to do is just follow the orders. Just have to follow the orders.